Yusuf Cat Stevens, welcome to Gold. Whereabouts are you at the moment? In Dubai, I understand.
Yes, I live in Dubai. I've been here about 10 years now. Yeah, I'm quite a national.
Has it been a good day? Has it been a lovely warm day?
Yeah, it usually is. There's no surprises
Yeah.
here when you open the window. It's the same glaring sun, beaming through. But yeah, it's a nice place to be because I've got my grandchildren here. I'm very happy with them, seeing them and I've got a lot of space to be creative. So I mean, when this COVID thing happened, it was I was able to manage quite well actually, and come up with a lot of things to do.
All right. How has lockdown been in Dubai? Because it's been really tough here.
Yeah, well, it's been, it's the same everywhere in a way. It's difficult, but they kind of managed it quite well. They were very, very strict about the masks. The mask was like you had to wear it, otherwise you'd be fined like 10,000 dirhams, which is,
Yeah.
I don't know, £2,000 or whatever,
Wow.
on the spot. Yeah, so they were very strict about that, and they kept the numbers down, so that's good. I've had my jabs, and that was like so easy. It was like wow, so they've done things quite well here.
Brilliant. Now, it's 50 years since the brilliant song Peace Train. And to celebrate, you've got a wonderful children's book that is out this week, isn't it? With beautiful illustrations, and your lyrics are there as well. So really, what inspired you to put this book together, Yusuf?
Well, I've always loved drawing, and my songs kind of lean towards the visual aspects, and I was an artist before I was a musician, so therefore it's kind of natural. And I've always been drawing this Peace Train, my version of it. But when there came a time when Harper's so let's get the name right, HarperCollins publishers, they came to us and with the idea of the lyric book. I thought, that's a great idea. Then I don't even have to draw it, but they can find someone for me, to illustrate this. And they got this brilliant illustrator called Peter Reynolds. I love his style. And so that's where it began. And he came up with all these sketches, and I kind of gave a few ideas, but really he did it most on his own.
All right. Well, the illustrations, like you say, they're so colorful, featuring children from different cultures. And there's a beautiful message, behind the drawings, the illustrations, with the lyrics as well. You've done. Go on.
Yeah, Peace Train is obviously, it's a symbol. It's a symbol. You can look at it on many different levels. One of the levels is that, well, hang on, if it's a peace train coming, it means I can't stay where I am. It means I have to go somewhere else. But actually, then later on, it explains it's going to take you home. So actually, people aren't really where they really want to be. I think that's what the meaning is. And they would like to be somewhere else, or somewhere where everybody is kind of getting on with each other. There's no fighting, no calling names, nobody's stealing, nobody, that's kind of like a utopian concept. But, I mean, human being relies on hope, relies on ideas, to propel us forward. And that's the way we've progressed. And that's just being human.
All right. What was the original inspiration behind the song when you wrote it? What made you think, I'm going to write Peace Train? Can you remember back then?
Yeah, it was like in the 70s, so therefore, like the Vietnam War was very, very big, everywhere. There was news about the Vietnam War, and there was a massive movement for peace. I mean, the Beatles were there, sort of heading it as well, writing All You Need Is Love and so many other things. And so, I'm a child of that generation. And so that's in my DNA, to kind of to long for this world to get better, and I am an optimist. And so that anyway, it was 1970, and I was on a train, and I was going up north to a gig, like probably carting my own equipment as well. So at the same time, because I had these big orange, I don't know if you know about the big orange kind of amplifiers. They were massive. Anyway, we carried most of that stuff with us. And while we were traveling, the kind of rhythm of the wheels and the kind of the sound just got to me. And then I started writing this song, and that was the beginning of it. And then I kind of introduced it into my gigs, and people loved it, and it was kind of the moment, it was that moment where everybody kind of wanted to be together.
All right. Well, Peace Train has become more than just the song now, because it's part of the Yusuf Foundation charity. And you've been doing some amazing work around the world with food banks, clean water, the Peace Train Express and the Rambler. Maybe you'd like to tell us a bit about that. You've been out there and visited the people yourself, haven't you, Yusuf?
Yes, I mean, I think I've always been interested in doing charity, because the moment you start getting a few pounds in your pocket, you start to feel a little bit guilty about the people who don't really have it. So then, you start to think, how can I help? And I've been involved in different charities along the way, but this one is kind of, it's giving wheels to the Peace Train. And what we do is, we deliver food packages, we deliver hot meals, we've been given free breakfast, for kids who can't afford it in UK. We're also developing some sort of Peace Train playgrounds in certain areas, deprived areas, and the whole point is, it's based on the prophetic saying, feed the hungry and spread peace. So anyway, there's a lot of things you can see it all on my website, actually, if you go there under Peace Train.
I've had a look. It's a terrific website. There's so much detail in there. All right, can we go back to 1966 and talk a bit about the 60s days growing up in London? You were 18 in 66, performing in London's coffee houses and bars, and apparently it was Mike Hurst, formerly of the Springfields, who helped you get a record deal. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, it was all kind of one thing after another. It was kind of contacts. You had to have contacts. Yep. One of the first things my brother did, my big brother, he went into Tin Pan Alley, and that's where everybody was, and they used to go to this cafe. He went in that cafe, and he stood on the table. He said, "I've got a genius brother. Can anybody help me get him in the business?" Something like that. This is my brother, okay. David. And, that was the beginning. He says, we got a name, and then suddenly there was someone else, and then there was someone else. But Mike Hurst came in, and I knew that I'd struck gold when I met him, because he was a Springfield. He was like with Dusty Springfield. They were the Springfields.
Yes.
Before she went solo. And one of my all-time favorite records was Island of Dreams. I thought, here's a guy that's going to take me to my Island of Dreams. So it was great. And he really understood me, sort of, and he listened to my son. When he heard I Love My Dog, and my name was Cat Stevens at that point, I'd chosen that name. Then he said, this has got to be a winner. So anyway, he kind of backed me with everything that he had. He was about to actually immigrate to the USA, but then he stopped all that. We did this record, and then everything changed. So he was the one who gave me my first sort of leg up, if you like.
Right. So you mentioned I Love My Dog, and that was your first hit, and you followed it up with a song called Matthew and Son, which we play a lot on Gold. And I was just wondering, what was the story behind the song Matthew and Son?
Well, Matthew and Son, I did work in my dad's cafe, but he wasn't Mr. Matthew. No. Yeah, I can't say that, but because he didn't work me that hard. But I was brought up on kind of the stories of Dickens, and the sort of the idea of the workshop and the industrial sort of machine which reduces people to just to non-existent little cogs. And that's really the idea, and that's where, when I started drawing, I did a few drawings to actually, to when they publicized and sort of marketed the single, I drew Mr. Matthew and Son, and it looked like a Dickens, illustration. So that was the idea. The name, I think I got it from, I was sitting on the top of a bus, and I think it was when I was passing through the city, and I saw this name, Matthew and Son, and it kind of fitted a riff that I had perfectly, so that's where it started.
All right. I'd actually seen the cartoon that you did for Matthew and Son, and you've done a lot of your own cover artwork, as you mentioned earlier, for Tea for the Tillerman and Teaser and the Firecat. And your first ambition was actually to be an artist, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, because I had an uncle in Sweden. My mother, was Swedish. My father was from Cyprus, but in Sweden, my uncle was quite well known, and he was one of the first abstract, painters And he was the first one to really give me confidence and put kind of the pencil in my hand and let me scribble away and encourage me. And of course, my mother took over after that. She always encouraged me.
All right. Well, it's a real talent to have, I'll tell you. I would imagine growing up in London in the 60s with the music scene, how it was back then, it must have been amazing. What were your really big influences? What made you pick up a guitar and say, I've just got to do this?
Well, yeah, I mean, artists don't make that much money. Anyway, you have to usually wait until they're dead. Then they start earning, but not much good to them. But anyway, so no, it was when I saw the Beatles, it was just, everybody along with me, in my generation, especially in UK, they were being fed also by the blues, all the kind of sounds which were coming across from the stateside,
Yep.
all the new singles which were coming into Liverpool Port, they were getting these things. And I was listening to a lot of that stuff in the discotheques at that time. And R&B was just massive. And when the Beatles kind of combined that with the kind of Mersey sound, it was just unbelievable. It was just so strong, so great. That's where it began for me. And I've always loved R&B. And now you can see the roots of the Beatles right there in the cavern.
Yeah. Is there any particular Beatles song that you really love?
Oh, I think
all of them.
I think Twist and Shout was the thing that broke all the sound barriers for everybody. It's like when John went,
yeah,
broke that wall down, and that was it. We were through. That was it.
Oh, such a brilliant song. Now, in 1967, I've got to ask you about this. You headed out on tour with the Walker Brothers, Engelbert, and Jimi Hendrix. How was life on the road for you in the 60s? How did you find it?
Well, it was kind of tough because, I didn't play my guitar in those days. So I used to write my songs on guitar and I was always comfortable with the guitar. But somehow when we went into the studio, it was always, what happened was the arranger came in and then the musicians came in. They kind of took the song away from me. And so when I went on stage, I had to kind of recreate the sound, which wasn't really me. So it was a little bit of a barrier, and I had to fight all the time with kind of the sound system, and the band wasn't playing it right, and they weren't big enough, and there wasn't enough strings and whatever. So it was a bit frustrating. But of course, I got a lot of screens. So I thought, well, I must be doing something right.
Yeah, what was Jimi Hendrix like?
Oh, he was great. He was probably my closest friend. Him and Engelbert, actually, we both kind of hung out together. And he was a very, basically, he was a quiet, sort of introverted person. I mean, he was high on a few things. Maybe that's what made him go within, But and then Engelbert got me to be a little bit more outward and extrovert when he introduced me to port and brandy. But anyway. So it was just an amazing tour, I mean, could you think of that,
Yeah, just amazing. Now, listen, Yusuf, you have written some great songs, songs like Wild World and Moonshadow. First Cut is the Deepest. What a song, covered by Rod Stewart and Sheryl Crow as well, amongst others. P.P. Arnold, did you actually sell the song to her? I read something that you sold the song lyrics to her.
No, that's a kind of a rumor which got slightly distorted. What happened was everybody kind of felt that was a really good song. It was really a hit song. Yeah. So Mike took it and didn't. I mean, he wanted to record it with P.P. Arnold, so he produced that record. And I think during that time they signed it to a publishing company who kind of took more than they should have done. Okay. And we're just about getting that back now. I can imagine the injustices of it all.
It seems to go like that with publishing companies.
It does, but I did get my royalties, and PRS and all that stuff. I mean, that was pretty good, but the publishing element, they were always double dipping, if you like, to me.
Yeah, and Father and Son, that is such a beautifully written song that so many people can relate to. And wasn't it originally going to be for a musical called Revolution?
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, as you know, I was born in the West End, so therefore I was surrounded by all these theatres and musicals. Would like it was massive. West Side Story. It changed my life. And so I wanted always to write a musical. So somehow I delayed it and delayed it and delayed it, until one point, when I was, after my sort of illness, TB, I was coming back, and I was inspired, and I got together with a manager who was kind of sort of connected to the theatrical world, and we started thinking about music, and we came up with this idea about the Russian Revolution. Well, that's not a small sort of piece of cake. This is like the Russian Revolution. So anyway, but the story of came out of that story, where the son is actually wanting, to join the march and to change the world, and so it's a great story behind the song, but it means so many things to so many different people. I mean, it's become part of life for so many, and it's a way in which some fathers and sons talk to each other, because they can like put on the song and say, you see what I mean?
Yeah. And you mentioned you were seriously ill with tuberculosis at 19. That must have been terrifying.
Yeah, it was a bit, because you're seeing, like, people were actually dying, from that. But they'd kind of discovered this this cure, if you like, sort of a thing called streptomycin. But it was a massive tablet which you had to take every day. But it saved my life, and so I'm so grateful. That was the NHS, by the way. I think it was born in the same year that I was, 1948.
Good old NHS. Now, I'd like to play something from the album Buddha and the Chocolate Box, and the song "Oh Very Young." That is such a good song. What's it all about? What inspired you to write that, Yusuf?
Well, I think after I'd done a record called The Foreigner, a lot of people kind of turned off me into the way, what's he talking about? So I thought, I have to regain my position with my friends, and so I started writing kind of a whole lot of songs. But this was one song which I called it struck a real chord, because it talks to the future generation and saying, well, this is the world that we're leaving you. Now, what kind of world are you going to leave your next generation? So it has a great ecological message. I'm very proud of it.
All right. Now, I wanted to ask you, if I may, about your religion and converting to the Muslim faith. How did that come about? Didn't you have kind of a life-changing experience in the Pacific?
Yeah, I mean, there were lots of things that contributed. Of course, the first thing was TB. That was where I started reading spiritual books, metaphysical books about, well, who am I? Who's the person who's within me? Forget about the body, and start to think about the conscious self. Anyway, that's where it all started, and that was sort of Buddhism, if you like. And then it went on, and then I had a few. Obviously, I got very, very big. Then fame sort of hit me in the face, and I was kind of now having to respond. And I kept, well, I did, and everything I was writing was more or less a kind of description and a kind of recording of what was happening to me spiritually. So if you listen to my albums, you'll see the kind of spiritual development as it went. But anyway, at one point, it was a pretty dark period, and I think about 1975, and I was coming out with an album called Numbers, and it was pretty dark. And anyway, at that point, I went for a swim, in Malibu. I was doing it in Los Angeles, I was mixing the album, and then suddenly I could swim, but at this point I couldn't. The waves and the current was just too strong, and so at that point there was no more time left in my life to do anything except pray, and I prayed to God, and he saved me. And at that moment, a wave, pushed me forward, and I was back on land. And right after that, very soon after that, my brother had gone to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And he sort of discovered Islam. He saw this beautiful mosque in the middle, of this wonderful city of saints and prophets. And then he said, well, what's this religion? And then he came back to UK, and he got me a gift of the Quran, gave it to me as a birthday present. And that was the beginning of my kind of broadening of my understanding of what religion is. When you don't shut the doors, to anything, then you find that a lot of the doors actually link up, together. But a lot of people don't see it like that because they keep the door shut.
I see. Now, last year, it was the 50th anniversary of the Tea for the Tillerman album, and you decided to re-record the
And
I think it was your son's idea, wasn't it?
can't remember whose idea. I think it was his idea. Yeah, he usually comes up with these ideas. And he said, why don't we try and do it? But it wasn't that we were going to do it exactly the same. We were going to just reimagine it, so like if you're going to paint the Mona Lisa twice, well, maybe give her a red scarf or something, do something different, so anyway, that was the idea. We were going to do something which was more now, and a lot of people really liked it because it reminded them of what they loved about the old album, but it also gave them something new.
All right, and you re-recorded the whole album, and you did new interpretations of the songs, and you kind of did a duet with yourself on the song "Father and Son."
Yeah, that was again, my son's idea. Because we had this kind of recording of me in the Troubadour in Los Angeles back in 1970.
All right.
And it was pretty clear and pretty clean. And so all we did is we lifted up that and did a little bit minor kind of timing amendments in the studio, and it fitted perfectly. And there I am singing to myself, who is older than me, but he's younger. But, it's confusing, but it was fantastic and it worked so well.
I know the tracks sound really good. Where Do the Children Play sounds terrific on that album. What are your future plans? What have you got lined up once we get past the lockdown and we get back to more normal life?
Well, let's hope for that. And there's a lot of things on the plate at the moment. So I've written my autobiography, so that's going to be a big thing for me to come out with my book. And also, by the way, I've illustrated it. So every chapter has got kind of a little kind of illustration of how I saw a particular scene of that time in that chapter. And
all right.
Yeah, it's great. And we've got an album, already ready to go, actually, because it was the Teeth of the Tillerman 50th that kind of stopped that in its wake. So we've got another album to come out. We're working also on cartoons and some animation for children using my songs. And it's a lot of things going on. A documentary also, waiting to be done. So I'm pretty busy, yeah. And of course, we have the charity Peace Train, initiative, which we're also very involved in.
All right. What's next for the charity?
Well, the next thing for the charity, I think, is to keep working and to make people more aware that, that the peace has lots of conditions, but one of the main conditions for peace is security. So you can actually translate peace as security. So if people are, not hungry, that they've got shelter, their jobs are secure, or they've got somehow the family, is together, that's security, that brings peace. And so if you look at it, it's one thing to feed somebody. It's another one to give them an idea of what they can do with their life. And I think that's part of the thing that Peace Train is all about. It's trying to learn how to live together. Yeah. And I think once you get to that point, you have to go back to some pretty good rules that the prophets all laid down for us. You can't really get any better than that. So it's just kind of reminding people of how to be good,
Yeah, well, where actually have you been yourself with the Peace Train charity? Because I've seen pictures on the website of you walking with the children in, I think it was Pakistan, wasn't it?
No, there was, I mean, I've been around, but that last picture I think was in Turkey, in the, it's close to the Syrian border.
All right.
With the Syrian children, most of them. And I've been to sort of Pakistan. I was in Ethiopia back in 1973. So, I mean, I've been on the road for a long time. But UK has also been a sort of a place where we've been working quite a lot. And the Peace Train has been very active in a place called Oldham.
Yeah.
Oldham, which is very, very, deprived, let me say. Sorry. And needs a lot of help. And so there's a lot of places like that. And of course, we still run schools as well in London. So I'm involved in that as well.
Brilliant stuff. I just wanted to say all the very best of luck with the book, with the book Peace Train. It's a terrific book.
Thank you.
And beautifully illustrated. And thank you very much.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.